Beep. What is up, ninjas? My name is Sam World, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to create a very nasty sound that you can find in the breakdowns of people like Aces with his track The Acid and Teenage Mutants track Rio, which are currently in the Beatport's top 100. Now this sound, guys, is going to be the highlight of your breakdown. It's going to be like your trophy wife, trophy girlfriend grabs attention. No one's looking at you, they're looking at her. Same thing with this sound. No one's going to be hearing the ARP in the background if you have one, which you don't want to have. With this sound, you just want to have that sound, maybe a few elements, a few atmosphere in the background, but this sound is going to take up the majority of your break, and if you do it right, it will create such a climatic break experience for your listeners. Literally, guys, I have these tracks on repeat. I play it through my stereo and I just bump it up when those parts come because it's just so massive in the way that it sounds, and today you're going to be able to do that as well. Now last week, guys, I released a sound bank called Paradox for X-Ray Records Serum, which contains 150 modern techno presets. If you guys are in the market for these type of sounds and you want to support the channel, make sure to check them out. I always leave the link in the description down below. Hear the sounds. If they're for you, awesome. If they're not, it's all good, guys. But at the end of the day, that's the best way to support my channel, and let's get started with this tutorial. All right, guys, and welcome inside of Ableton. Now right now I have a progression here for us to use, which sounds like this. So it's going to be the one from Teenage Mutants Real, okay? But we're going to use that sort of just to have something to have the sound play. So we can talk about all the techniques needed to create the sound as well as how to automate it. Now, this is a very simple progression, but what's going to make it sound complex and heavy is going to be the automations we're going to have to create for it to make it sound more interesting. Of course, right now it sounds very empty and you're like, oh yeah, you wouldn't want to use one sound just in the break, man. You need a lot more stuff going on. However, as we progress throughout the sound, you're going to see why I say this is the only sound you want in your break when it's fully developed, okay? Now, the sound we're going to be creating, guys, is a very heavy analog sound, like I stated. However, that doesn't mean we can't create it with a digital synth like Serum. Now, I don't know if these guys went and got like the Mini V from Arturia, or they actually have a Mockup 37 that they processed, but we can get something very similar to it, and you shouldn't let the fact that you're not using analog draw you back. Now, a lot of people would go instantly and say, okay, it sounds like a detuned sound, so I'm going to go with maybe 5 voices and detune here. And that sounds fine. The problem is that in Serum, when you have unison, let's say 4, and you start to detune, as every saw is detuned by a fine amount, it's also hard pan left and right equally, depending on if you have an even number or an odd. But there is a setting in the global section called width where we can make it mono. And it sounds good, but I find that it sounds a lot better when we take the analog technique. Now, in the Mockup 37 I have to my left, you know, each oscillator will only have one voice, and you can pick between a sine, a saw, a square, and whatnot. In this scenario, however, we're going to go with 2 saws, 2 oscillators. That's going to be the limitations there. But in order to create the detunement effect, we're going to have to change the fine of this guy. Instantly, it's going to sound a lot better, going to get a very similar effect, but it's going to sound a lot more analog. Now, as you can hear, the cool thing that happens when we manually detune this guy is that if these are both equally the same, it just sounds like a saw. But the fact is that I'm detuning this guy, which means I'm increasing the speed of it, you know, because a higher pitch sound will have a faster speed than a lower pitch sound. So in essence here, since the speeds are so close together but a little bit far off, you start to hear this guy moving a lot faster. Now, I don't have an LFO running right now, so the movement is coming from the difference in the pitch, and that's what's going to create the effect that we need for the track. So a lot of times you're going to hear these type of sounds and you're going, man, that movement sounds nice, I'm going to put in LFO. But no, it's created by the detunement, the change in speed of both of these, as they're the same note, but they're off by a few fine cents when it comes to the pitch. Now, the next thing to do here, guys, is the filter, and the filter is very important. We have the MG Low 12, MG Low 24, MG Low 18, we have low 12, low 24. All you have to know about these guys is different flavor, and the higher the dB, or sorry, the higher the number, the more harsh the cut is going to be. So 24, you can see it's cutting heavily. As we move down, you can see it's a little bit more lenient. So pick the one that you want. Either one is fine. You don't really have to worry about which one's analog and whatnot. You know, the Mockup 37, I believe, has all of these ladder filters here, the 6, the 12, the 18, and the 24. Now, from here, there is one more thing we can do, a few variations here before we move on. The first one is you can pitch this up, which we are going to have for ours. or you can have it set to 0. The cool thing about having this pitched up is that once you put a filter, it sounds like it's taking up a little bit more. It has a little bit more mid-lows in there. On account of if we have 0, it's a little bit more lower bass and boomy. Now, the other effect would be to have this at +1 and then have a 7th semitone vibe to this. Now, this is going to create more of a Stefan Botzin kind of sound. And if that's what you want, cool, you can do that here. You don't want it at 0-0 because it sounds like too close together. You're trying to create harmony, but it's like when you play the piano chords at a very low octave together, it sounds crappy, and then you have to open voice it, which is what we're doing by putting this up in octave. But here I'm gonna set this to 0, and we're gonna have this set like this with a low pass, and that's about it. Okay, cool. Now, the next thing I'm going to recommend you guys do is grab your mod wheel here and drag it onto the cutoff filter where you open it up all the way. That way you can use this to control the cutoff. Pretty cool, right? All right, here we're going to put this at around 50. So we get that movement and we're done there. Now, the next thing to do here, guys, is create some movement for the sound, and that's going to have to deal with the filter. If you hear the Aces track and the Teenage Mutant track, essentially they have an LFO on there, which is, you know, in the Aces track, it's modulating and slowing down, while in the Teenage Mutant, it stays stable, and then it goes a bit faster as we approach the buildup. This is where you can make this your own. Here, what I'm going to do is use LFO1, drag it to the cutoff here. I'm going to make this bipolar, as a lot of the analog synths I have here, like the Prophet and the Moog Sub 37, are bipolar, which means they go in both directions. Here, by default, you can see I'm going in one direction, but if I hold Alt, Shift, and click, now I go in both directions, and that's what I'm going to want. Now here, I'm going to control the speed on where I want it. I want a fairly slow speed, so I'm going to turn on the trip and the dot so I can get something that's a little bit in between 1/4 and 1/8. Pretty cool. Now, the cool thing here, guys, is that if you want something that's like a wub, leave it as is. But if you want something a little bit harder, then you can go with that route. And I'm going to go with the more harder one where it's a saw. Like a... Okay, cool. Now I'm going to automate the mod wheel to open up so that by the time we get here, it's fully open. Okay, let's make sure that's... Let's make sure this LFO is not fully that high up, like closing it fully down. There we go. Okay, so it's opening up for us and it sounds great. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put mono legato always here so that we get a bit of glide between the notes. When you have it set to always, you don't need to make your notes overlap in order to get the glide effect. There we go. Sounding fucking cool right there, man. Now, the other thing we can do here, guys, is the resonance is very important. However, when you have it high, you run the risk of it sounding very corny the higher we get. However, if we have it here in the low, but the higher it goes, you start to get that more resonating alien vibe. So one of the things you could do is maybe have it on and then automate it down, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to have this be like this here. And there we go. Okay, now from here, if you do have a bit of resonance, the cool thing is that when you apply a bit of distortion in a heavy amount, that's what I'm going to do, it creates some really cool vibes coming out of it. Okay, cool. Now, we're approaching sort of like the end of the sound on how it's going to sound like opened and closed, and you can do whatever you want with it, change the speed and whatnot. But you're probably still going like, yeah, Sen, but it still sounds empty. Well, that's where the effects come into play. Now, in my return tracks here, I'm going to have a little plate, which is a plate reverb, easy to use, low cut here so that we get rid of the low frequencies. We don't want to add reverb down there because then it's just going to turn into a mess. However, everything above, let's say like 100, 200 is fair play. I'll leave the decays by default and make sure your mix is fully wet and when you're using a return. I do have a echo delay here, which is a ping pong effect, which I'm using here, the filter to cut out the lows, as I just want the top end to kind of filter left and right. And I'm going to show you why we have this one here. But for now, let's just add a bit of reverb to this, and you're gonna see the difference that it makes and why you only want to use one sound in your break, which is gonna be this one. So it's gonna get a little bit louder, guys. I've added just an ozone preset master here just to get it a little bit louder so you guys can hear the presence that we're gonna get with the reverb. So here it goes. Brace your ears. As loud as it's gonna get. You can control the plate reverb however you want here, guys, but you can see how the effect works. Now, I kind of don't like the sound when it's fully open, so I'm gonna leave it maybe here. I like it there. I'm not gonna go much higher than that, but some tracks do that, so it's up to you to decide, okay? Now here I'm gonna turn the RN phase down and make them start in the same position. Now, apologize for some of the clicks. I'm running like a bad quality audio driver right now, so when you hear that, that's just gonna be the quality of my audio driver. Okay, cool. Now, the last thing we're going to add here is a delay. Now, the reason for the delay is this. Let's say I get rid of my mod wheel modulations, and then I decide to do some cool stuff like this. As I do this, I'm going to have those delays kick in, and it's going to sound epic. There you have that delay going there. Now, the delay by default, guys, is still going. The feedback here is going to create the frequency. So if you have a low feedback on our delay, essentially it's just going to create this, and then it'll stop. So it's up to you to decide how much you want, like pa 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 or pa pa pa, and that's it with the feedback. Okay, I'm going to get rid of some of the highs in that delay there because I just want a bit more of a warmer delay, and then 1/8 ping pong. Now, the reason we have ping pong is because this sound is very mono. So in order to create width to it, we use stereo effects. So the ping pong is going to be a stereo effect. If we use a simple delay and they're both the same value, we don't get stereo. In fact, we're going to get the delay on top of the bass that we already have. And a lot of times that can sound a little bit dirty. Okay. All right, guys. Now, the way you use this is pretty simple. Again, just modulate stuff. For instance, in the second part of the break of the Teenage Mutant ones, they add a flanger on top of it. So you can do anything you think would sound good with it, anything that changes over time with it, but essentially that is the sound. You know, you have a lot of different variations that you can do, the +7, if that's what you want. When you're doing these melodies, you can add a bit of this sort of, let's assume like very fast kind of notes where maybe it creates something cool and you can kind of automate the filter up. You know, like anything like that would really work. I mean, let's try that one more time. Put that at 0. Okay, let's put the resonance down as that's creating a bit of but hopefully you guys get the idea. And that creates a lot of cool possibilities, a lot of cool stuff. You can create more complex progressions if you want, but essentially, guys, that's the only sound you're gonna need in your break, and then you just transition properly into your drop. But I hope you guys found this tutorial helpful. We talked about a lot in terms of the technique and what's needed and how you get this to sound fat with like a standard reverb and echo delay. Hopefully you guys do it in some of your tracks, and hopefully I get to hear them. But with that being said, guys, want to support my channel, Paradox is out with 150 presets. That's how this is gonna look. It's just a very ton of them, which you can utilize in your tracks. A lot of inspiration there, sequences and everything you guys need to make modern techno. Check it out if you want to support the channel, and I'll see you guys next time for another video. Take care and peace out.